Welcome back. This is going to be a random project. It just happens to be Friday night and I have nothing else really better to do, honestly, and it's actually Christmas Eve and I was just thinking of crafting one more late minute thing for somebody, and I was just sitting here just playing around. I said, you know what, I'm just gonna whip the camera out, and it's already in the room on the tripod anyway, might as well just wheel it right around and hook my mic up and just start recording and see what happens. And that's exactly it. I mean, I have all my tools kind of laid out already, and this idea came about because I looked up on my little organizer shelf up here, and in this spot sat this jar, and all it is a glass jar, little lidded thing, and these are all components that I've taken off of just playing around when I first got this new Hakko soldering iron, just to see how good it worked. And yeah, there's actually, most of these parts probably are still good. It's actually, most of it's from an old switched mode power supply that I salvaged out of, I think, like an old DVD player, or, you know, something like that. So all these parts in here should still work, and I've saved them just as like spares, or, you know, who knows what. And actually I just had them in a bag, and I had a bunch of these jars. I said, you know, actually it looks like a nice little display thing to have just sitting on a shelf, especially in an electronics lab like this. Anyway, so we're going to dump this out, and using some just different pieces I have here, some wire, some solder, some bare wire, like bundling wire here, and some just basic hand tools. I have my helping hands. These are some needle nose, like fine pliers, and of course my beer choice. We're gonna crack that open in a moment here. Yeah, say what you will, I know Rolling Rocket's a cheap beer, but once you find your poison, you go with it, right? Anyway, we got the hot iron going over here, the Hakkos, and we also have the generic hot glue gun, but that's already heated up because the thing takes forever, because eventually there's going to be some hot glue involved in this thing. And I'm not sure exactly what we're going to make. It's not going to have any function. It's going to be more art, if that makes sense. We're going to take these components and we're going to make some artsy kind of thing out of it. Maybe a little man, a little being of sorts, maybe a little robotic looking thing. I don't know what yet, but we're going to dump these out and see. Also, I have an idea. There are a couple loose LEDs in here, so of course perhaps we can make something light up. One good way I just came up with real quick as I was thinking about it was, again, more salvaged pieces. These are magnets from inside of a actual laptop sized hard drive. These two magnets actually mate with each other, and this is just a regular battery, like a backup battery from a computer, and that's just, you know, parts. I have tons of these things lying around, so whenever I scrap a hard drive or a computer or whatever, I try to grab as many useful pieces as possible, and usually these batteries are still good. They're 3 volts. These LEDs that are in this container here will run at 3 volts, so I think that's a win-win. And my idea was, if you look, we could actually connect the battery, will directly connect to this magnet, obviously, and then they'll connect together. Now you have to be careful because you don't want it to short, but if you do it quickly enough, we can get it where they are sandwiched together, but they're not actually making contact because the battery is just a little bit thicker. So you can actually attach like an LED directly, like the leads right to here, and maybe another one over here where they come down together. There's a third point in the back, so you can actually light a few different pieces off this battery, and then to change it you can just swivel it out and pop the battery out from the magnetic release here. But I thought that was kind of interesting, and maybe perhaps we can also solder in here. Now I know on Jillian Illett's channel, he tried to come up with a neodymium system for connecting wires to a battery for testing purposes, and you know, this actually might be a viable option for that, because you can solder possibly to these ends here, or at least fashion some kind of system with a little nut and bolt and maybe a little ring connector on the end of a wire, and just connect it that way. But if you do solder it, you're not going to have to worry about the heat, because his problem was once you applied heat to this magnet, it lost its magnetic properties. This may be a way to actually make any kind of LEDs we put into this thing light up. Also, we can use this as a base. So we could possibly stand it down like that and then build our little thing off of it so the battery's down the bottom. This is all going to be on the fly, and I'm not sure if I'm going to let the camera just roll the whole time and we'll abbreviate the footage, or if I'm going to do little snippets like I typically do. Haven't quite decided that, because this is a whole new thing for everyone. Also, somewhere around here I have a container of pieces like this, and this is all again from hard drive, so we might be able to build something pretty unique looking. In fact, actually, if you look at these holes look like maybe the size of 3mm LEDs, so you know, that's possibly a way you can hold some stuff on there. In fact, it gives me an idea for something completely different. In fact, let me go dig out some of the other parts I have here. Yep, and here I have a bin of all sorts of different pieces, and this is all just actual hard drive read heads. But you know, you could make some things out of this. That looks like a foot for something, or a beak for a like dinosaur, like robotic thing. Who knows? Like, if you have a very creative mind, all these parts are useful. These are actual motors. This is what the hard drive spindle would connect to. These are actually stepper motors, so they need a whole different thing to operate than just normal power. But you could do a lot with a stepper motor if you knew how to control it and had the specifics of it. I don't know if these will push a whole lot, but they could spin pretty fast. But that's beyond what we're going to use. But they're shiny and they have a decorative purpose, so if we're going to try making something, this might be useful for that. There's all kinds of rings in here. These are just for spacing out the platters on the hard drives. There's a bunch of those. If you're into crafting rings and stuff like that, I mean, I know they're a little bit large, but perhaps they have a nice sound to them. You can craft some rings out of these. Like, again, I know they're large. I figure we have these parts at our disposal, so if we want, we can actually utilize some of these things for something. For some reason, every time I look at these things, I think of the little I never remember the name of it, the little energy device from the Iron Man movies. And I figured you could probably use definitely something like this to mock something up to look like that. So yeah, if you get a bunch of these old hard drives and take them all apart and save the pieces, you can definitely get some pretty interesting and useful looking stuff. Oh, and of course, before I go any further, let's just open that and set that to the side. I'll take a swig in the moment. Okay, we're gonna dump out all this stuff now, and you can see what I mean. This is just a big pile of all kinds of stuff. But there's definitely some potential here, especially if you have repeating pieces. Like if you wanted to make like a chest plate for something, like a little robot, you can just put these pieces, especially with the writing on it exposed, so it looks like it does something. Or maybe if you want to make like a little mouth, and maybe take I don't know, you got to find some matching pieces to make it work. But if you wanted to make some capacitors as eyes, you could do something like this. Hey, you know, something cool like that. But to connect all of it, you're just basically gonna use hot glue. And if you want to get fancy and make it look like it does something, you can actually run some of this wire here through and solder to all the connections. You know what? I think what I'm going to do is, to save a bunch of rambling on, I'm going to go ahead and start messing around with this off camera and be influenced by some beer here, I guess you could say, and see what happens. Oh, it's been an hour, maybe hour and a half. I don't know. Time just flew right by. I figured, you know, I better do an update because I'm getting kind of ahead here, literally. Yeah, look, it's a little head. So yeah, I went with the original idea that I had for putting some capacitors for some eyes, and there's little resistors in the nose. There's even a little Zenny or diode there just to give it a little bit of a thing. There's these are like protection capacitors that you'd have in like a power supply, and then for a little tongue there, it's just a ceramic capacitor. So these pretty much all capacitors and resistors. You can see there's one big one here, acts like a neck, and this is all just hot glued together. There's 3 different pieces up here, kind of just wedged together, just built in stages, just a dab of glue here and there, and then I would just get it where I want, and I would fill in the rest. So it's actually pretty solid, and it's actually kind of heavy, but it looks kind of good so far. I went for a look like, I guess, I don't know what kind of look I was going for, but it kind of looks neat. It was just something I bodged together, so that was the idea of it. But I have other pieces here, like this is just a bunch of capacitors put around a ring, and I was thinking maybe set this in here. There's another piece like this, looks like a shield. I was thinking like maybe like a chest plate. You know, I wasn't sure what to do for a body, but actually I kind of like the little idea of just leaving this like a little head, and it almost looks like it's like a little robotic little thing like that anyway. So what I did was I took 2 green LEDs, and these are just the not really the brightest ones, you know, they're just those indicator lights, and I just used some of this wire here in the background and some heat shrink, and the black indicated one is the negative and the bare one is positive. So if I take that battery, which is just lined about over here, and wire this in, you see it does light up. And I have 2 of them, so I'm thinking about putting these maybe on the sides here. Not sure, I haven't figured out exactly where I want to put these yet, but I'm probably going to go with the idea of having the battery as a base, or perhaps maybe some kind of a backpack on this thing, or I don't want to really put it on the top of it. That would look kind of silly, but then again, the thing already looks silly on its own. I had to put this down for a little bit last night because it was getting late, but I did manage to do just a little bit before I went to bed, and I did some this morning, so I figured it's time for another update. So it's coming along pretty nicely. You see I got this like little ring around the bottom here, and I don't think it's going to get much taller. I think I'm going to leave it like this. It kind of has like a robotic theme going on. You can see we get the wires coming out the back here for the LED lights. We'll figure out how we're going to implement that momentarily. Another thing I figured out, the battery, I don't know if I mentioned or not, but I took the little tabs that were at the corners over here and I bent them in the opposite direction, so there's less chance of them shorting out, but you can actually fit 2 batteries side by side. Now this is going to give you the same voltage but double the capacity essentially. Now there is enough magnetic forces, I guess you could say, to allow the magnets to actually stick doubled on each other. This will give you the same capacity but twice the voltage. I'm going to leave it in the doubled mode, but if you look and see, we could take the other piece here and it mates up perfectly, and we'll get 3 volts right out of those 2 connections. Now the thing is, there's just one last little tab, and we could use that little tab right here to just kind of center this a little better. And I actually glued one of those hard drive pieces. Now this one's a little different because there's actually a notch that was cut out to allow room for this wire to come out so it could sit flush. And then I filled the whole thing with hot glue to really keep it down. But this is actually going to attach like this, and this will become the base, and those little spots that I bent upwards will become feet. And actually tested this out, it does sit pretty stably, so that's good. Now the thing is going to be implementing the actual switch, or some kind of a switch, so we can actually power this off when it doesn't need to be lit up. Not that it will die out fairly quickly, but there's no need to kill the batteries if you're not using it. Oh yeah, the other thing, I took a couple of these TO220 packages and soldered them together. I just held them together in the helping hands over here and just clamped it and then heated it up. And the soldering iron got this hot enough where the solder just crept its way right through to the end, and that's definitely very solid. But what I did was I made it look like little fingers, and if you look, it's actually like double-sided. This one's glued in back here. Obviously this one's not glued, so you don't have to see the glue, but I made it look like it was holding a little shield. And the idea is I'm going to make them look like a little knight kind of motif here. The other hand is it's kind of a closed fist. I actually soldered the ends of it, so it has a little grippy part to it. And I started with these power resistors, and we're going to make it hopefully look like it's holding a sword of some sort. So we'll have the sword like that on one side and the shield on the other side like this, and we'll make it a little knight little dude. I think it looks kind of neat. It's something you're going to sit in the shelf and just, oh yeah, my brother made that, or my son made that, whoever is going to get this for Christmas. There's a little hint. But anyway, yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead, put this on hold for just a few minutes. My wife's on her way home. Yes, she had to work today, being Christmas Eve, and I'm gonna sit down and have some dinner with her, and then when I come back to it, we'll get this all tidied up. I gotta get the ball rolling now, because it is, after all, Christmas Day, and I gotta give this to its recipient in a few hours. I did some work, not too much last night, and I did some this morning. I couldn't pull the camera out because it was when wife was still sleeping. So now it's time to do a little quick update. I actually came up with a switch device, and all it is just a little jumper with some leads behind it, and if you short out these 2 pins, it'll act like a switch, and then if you want, you can put it into the other position just so you don't lose the little jumper. But I wanted to show that off before I actually hot glued everything down. And this is going to sit in the bottom, so it'll look like this, and then this wire will go up to the positives of the LED system. But that's that. And then on the bottom here, still have to attach this via hot glue. I got the hot glue gun heating up as we speak. But you can see I kind of just wrapped the wires around this little center ring here. It was hot glued in, but I found that it didn't really take that well. So wrapping the wires around it like this holds it in place, and it can be, you know, slightly adjusted. And then once we put this up into position here and hot glued into place, that'll, you know, solidify that, and then the bottom will just come in and connect via magnetism and hold the batteries in place. So what I'll have to do too is, you can see I already shortened the green wire here, and these bare wires here will also have to get shortened, and they're going to connect, so that way when this comes up into here, we'll have this short little tail of wires. So this won't go too far when it's unconnected here and the batteries aren't in place, but then once it goes up like that, I set this little guy down and he'll kind of just stay upright. Also, I put a capacitor on the ends of the little claws, so it actually make it look like a little arm, and this is going to come off the side of him like this, and then the same thing with the shield. This is going to sit over here like this, and that way it gives him a little bit more of a stance. He's not sitting so close together with everything. And the sword, I just put some heat shrink at the end of it. This is actually just a piece of wire that I soldered on the end over here. You can see the little corkscrew in it. And then there's this piece in the middle here for filler, and just to give it a little bit of strength, I just wrap some coated wire on there, and there's also a little piece of heat shrink at the end, just to give it more complete look. And yeah, he does hold that in his claw, no problem. You can insert that. There's actually a top and a bottom. If you insert it from the top, he holds it no problem in that hand. So that's pretty cool. So the hot glue gun's going to heat up here. I do have to position this. I'm probably going to solder this in here just so it's got some good physical metal on metal connection, and then I'll probably put a dab of hot glue in the back just to give it a second bond, and then this will get connected to the side. So finish the hands, connect the arms to the body, and connect the bottom, and we should be pretty much done. All right, let's have a look and see what we got. Ta-da! That's him all done. So I got the little switch back here as mentioned, and the way this is set up, we'll take our two batteries, and the negative lead is on the bottom, the positive's up on top here. So we'll just put this down. Obviously that's your positive, sit like that, and then this will just fold around like that onto the negative plate. And if you want to just fiddle them around a little bit and try to get these to line up, which it will, and then see the little LEDs are not on right now. If I take this little jumper switch back here and just move it over to these two other pins, you see the lights. Technically these are his eyes. And then of course that sword, we can put that little sword in his hand. That's it, little desktop warrior. Set you over here like this. Now he will stand up, and that's it. Well, with that, I want to thank you for watching. As always, if you're not a subscriber to this channel, you can click up in the link here in the corner to do so, and then in the bottom of the screen I'll have a couple of the links to some videos to check out. Thanks again. We'll see you guys next video.